The choir of dead leaves. The trees were bleeding again. Lena Marrow stared through the cracked windshield as her car crept along the winding dirt road. Rust-colored leaves spiraled downward in a slow, lazy rain, carpeting the forest floor in red. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it looked like the aftermath of something violent. She hadn't been back to Marrow Pines in 17 years. The old sign still hung near the entrance to town, barely legible under layers of moss and mildew. "Welcome to Marrow Pines, Easty 1832. Someone had scratched the word "run" across the bottom in deep gouges. Lena kept driving. Her grandmother's house emerged from the mist like a memory dredged up too soon. 2 stories tall, gabled and gray, it leaned slightly to one side as if exhausted. Vines strangled the porch columns. The attic window stared like an unblinking eye. Lena parked and stepped out, the air unnaturally still around her. No wind, no birdsong, just the brittle crunch of dead leaves beneath her boots. The key was still under the flower pot, just like always. Inside, dust clung to everything like ash. The living room was exactly how she remembered. Antique furniture, shelves of faded books, a fireplace filled with crumbling wood. And the piano. It sat in the corner like a beast at rest. Its ivory keys yellowed, the wood warped by time. Her grandmother had played every night. Songs that no one else knew. Songs that made the walls feel like they were listening. On the mantel sat a photograph, her grandmother, smiling faintly, holding a bouquet of dried leaves. Behind her, the forest loomed. In the corner of the photo, almost hidden by shadow, stood a figure Lena didn't recognize. It had no face. Lena set her bags down and lit a candle. The power hadn't worked in years, according to the letter. That final, cryptic letter her grandmother had sent before dying that it had only said, "The choir has gone quiet. They are waiting for you." Alright, here's the next part in the series. That night, Lena dreamed of music. A low hum rippled beneath her skin like an itch she couldn't scratch. In the dream, she stood in the middle of the forest, the trees bowing inward, their branches like skeletal hands. The leaves on the ground shifted, forming symbols, runes etched in rust. Voices rose, harmonic and sorrowful, surrounding her in a circular chant. The choir. She woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, the candle long since burned out. Somewhere in the darkness, something groaned. No, not something. The piano. She froze, ears straining. Another note. Then another, slow and broken, like a child fumbling through a lullaby in reverse. She reached for the flashlight and crept out of the bedroom. The house smelled faintly of wet wood and decaying flowers. The living room was empty, but the piano lid was open. The bench had moved. Heart hammering, she stepped forward. A single note pressed itself under her fingers, not by her will. She jerked her hand back. A thud from the attic above. She looked up. The ceiling boards creaked like footsteps. Her grandmother's room was up there. It had always been locked. She hadn't intended to go there tonight, but the footsteps, now slowly pacing, demanded otherwise. Lena grabbed the attic key from the drawer under the stairs. It was cold, slick with something like sap. Or blood. As she ascended the staircase, the music returned. This time not from the piano, but from inside the walls. A whisper of melody. A breath in harmony. The choir was not gone. It had been waiting. The key trembled in Lena's hand as she fitted into the attic door. It resisted, groaning like something alive, then gave way with a sharp click. The door creaked open, spilling a draft of freezing air down the stairs. The attic smelled of mildew, candle wax, and something metallic beneath it all. Blood maybe. Or rust. She stepped inside. Moonlight streamed through the cracked window, catching on motes of dust that floated like ash. The room was cluttered with forgotten relics. Old trunks, broken chairs, yellowed newspapers, jars filled with shriveled herbs and things that looked like bones. In the center of the attic was a circle of melted candles surrounding a worn leather-bound journal. Lena moved toward it slowly. The journal was her grandmother's. The front was embossed with a strange symbol, a tree with hands for roots and mouths for leaves. She flipped it open. The forest sings. It always has. You just have to be still enough to hear it. The leaves don't fall, they listen. They gather. They wait. Each note has a cost. Each harmony a name. Pages and pages of songs written in a language Lena couldn't understand followed. The notes were jagged, etched with shaking hands. Some pages were stained with tears. Or worse, suddenly the air shifted. Behind her, something creaked. She turned. In the far corner, the shadows parted just enough to reveal a rocking chair. It was slowly moving back and forth. Or was it? Lena stepped closer, flashlight flickering. Just beside the chair, carved into the floorboards, were dozens of names. Some were crossed out. Others were still raw, freshly etched. And beneath all of them, in frantic, carved strokes, Lena Marrow. The chair stopped rocking. Behind her, the attic door slammed shut. Lena lunged for the attic door, yanking the handle. Lock. No give. She beat against it with her fist. "Hello," she shouted into the dark, but the house didn't answer. Not with words, anyway. From the floor, a low vibration pulsed, like the hum of a tuning fork pressed to bone. The air seemed to tighten, and the journal on the floor flipped open on its own. Pages turned rapidly, faster and faster, then stopped. A song stared back at her. Its title was her name. She looked again at the etched floor. The names. Some she recognized, distant relatives long dead, townsfolk from childhood memories, a few of them barely teenagers. All of them carved in the same jagged hand. Except one. Near the edge of the circle, Elias Marrow. Her grandfather. She never met him. He vanished before she was born. Her grandmother never spoke of him. But the name was different, clean, deliberate, and circled in black. Suddenly, a sound, a faint rustle like leaves dragging across wood. But it was coming from the attic walls. The shadows writhed. A whisper, almost a song, slithered out. "She gave us voices, but not names. Names are power. We only borrowed hers, until we found yours." The rocking chair tipped forward and crashed to the floor. Lena stumbled back, heart racing, and the flashlight sputtered, dimming. When it flared back to life, something was sitting in the chair. It wore her grandmother's shawl. But it wasn't her grandmother. Its face was a hollow void, its mouth stretched into an open O, endlessly singing a note Lena could hear in her bones but not with her ears. The figure raised a hand. In its palm was a locket. Her locket. The one she'd buried with her mother. The figure in the rocking chair didn't move. But the locket in its palm began to open. Lena watched, paralyzed. Inside the locket, instead of the tiny photo of her mother that used to be there, was a curled, dead leaf, deep crimson, like dried blood. It fluttered slightly though there was no wind. The figure tilted its head as if listening. Then it whispered without sound, "Take it." Lena shook her head. "No, that's not mine anymore." But the attic began to pulse, walls breathing in slow rhythm, like a beast asleep and dreaming of hunger. The journal on the floor flipped again. This time, it showed a crude map of the forest. A tree was circled, and beneath it, the root choir. Suddenly, the door behind her unlocked with a loud click. Lena backed toward it slowly, never taking her eyes off the figure in the chair. As she reached the door frame, the figure raised its hand again, the locket now glowing faintly, casting shadows on the walls that didn't match the shape of the room. They looked like people, all of them singing. She ran, down the stairs, past the piano, which thrummed a single, mournful note as she passed, through the front door, out into the forest where the dead leaves danced in spirals. She didn't stop until she reached the clearing where she used to play as a child. The old swing still hung from a skeletal tree branch. She sat in it, panting, trying to make sense of what she'd seen. Then in the silence came a distant sound. A choir. Dozens of voices, high, low, cracked, angelic, rising in harmony. Lena stood, turning toward the sound, and she realized something terrifying. They were singing her "The Forest Pulled Her In." Lena didn't remember making the decision to move, but her feet followed the sound of the choir as if leashed to it. Every step she took stirred the dead leaves into brief flight, as if warning her not to continue, but they couldn't drown out the music. The trees grew stranger the deeper she went. Their trunks twisted like wrung cloth, bark peeled in perfect spirals. Some had scars in the shape of mouths. All of them leaned inward, their branches forming a cathedral of shadow. And at the center of it all, the tree. Massive, gnarled, ancient beyond comprehension. Its roots curled above the ground like sleeping serpents. Its trunk was split open, wide enough to reveal the hollow inside, and inside the shadows moved. Lena stepped closer, her breath fogged in the suddenly frigid air. There were things hanging from the tree. Figures. They weren't corpses, not exactly. They were frozen mid-song, mouths wide, eyes glassy. Their feet didn't touch the earth. Their throats were stretched open, and the sound came not from vocal cords, but from deep within the tree itself. It was using them as instruments. One of the faces turned toward her. A young girl no older than 15. Her eyes locked with Lena's. They were still alive, somehow. "Lena?" It was a whisper carried on the branches. Lena staggered back while rising. "What is this?" The base of the tree shimmered. The bark folded inward, revealing a tunnel. A staircase made of roots spiraled down. In the choir's rising swell, she could hear something else now. Drums. Slow like a heartbeat. And beneath it, words she did not want to understand. We gave her music. She gave us you. The tree waited. Lena hesitated at the edge of the opening. The tunnel beneath the tree yawned like a wound. Cold air gusted from it, carrying a smell of rot, damp stone, and something faintly sweet, like old perfume turned sour. The choir above her never stopped. It couldn't stop. Their mouths hung open, vibrating with unnatural harmony. Tears ran from their eyes in reverse, upward as if the tree refused to let any part of them fall. Lena took a breath, stepped onto the root stair, and began to descend. Each step squelched underfoot, the roots damp and pulsing faintly. The walls throbbed with low-frequency sound, a heartbeat rhythm beneath the music. The tunnel was alive. A throat. A passage. She didn't know how long she descended. Minutes? Hours? Time bled here. Strange carvings appeared along the walls. Twisted faces, open mouths, musical notation made from bones and thorns. Some looked like sheet music. Others looked like warnings. At the bottom, she entered a vast chamber, a cathedral hollowed from earth and root. Torches of leaf fire flickered along the walls, casting green and red shadows. At the center of the chamber was an altar, and on it lay a body. Her grandmother. Lena staggered forward. The old woman looked peaceful, hands folded over her chest, mouth sealed shut with a waxy black cord. But her eyes were open and watching. Suddenly, the choir above changed key. A new voice joined them, distant, beautiful, and agonizing. Lena knew it instantly. It was hers. The song was reaching through time, through blood, calling her voice into its harmony. She stumbled back from the altar as her own throat tightened, her mouth beginning to part against her will. In the far corner of the root chamber, something stirred. A figure made of bark and bone stepped into the light, wearing her grandfather's face. But it had no eyes. The figure stood in the flickering half-light, tall, angular, more tree than man. Its skin was bark cracked with time, laced with veins of sap that glowed like dying embers. But the face, it was Elias Marrow's, or what was left of it. A perfect replica carved from memory, grown into something ancient and wrong. Where eyes should have been, there were only hollows, tunnels vanishing into darkness. And from those hollows came a faint, whispering hiss, like wind through dry leaves. Lena couldn't move. The thing smiled. "You're almost ready," it said in her grandfather's voice, but slower. Stretched. She gave us her song. You will give us yours. Lena shook her head, backing away. "You're not him." The creature tilted its head. "No, I am what he became when the song claimed him." It stepped forward, the roots around the chamber recoiling from its presence. As it walked, the music from above grew louder. The harmonies faltered, then shifted to accommodate something new, something darker. Every generation offers one. A singer, a voice to carry the grief of the forest. Your grandmother gave herself to bind the others. But now her melody is fading. The figure gestured to the altar. Her grandmother's lips twitched beneath the wax seal. "You must continue the song, Lena, or the choir will unravel. And when it does, it will not sing. It will scream." Lena felt her throat burn. A phantom melody began to form in her lungs. Her lips parted involuntarily. Notes she didn't know forced their way up. She choked them back, falling to her knees. "You still have a choice," the hollow man said. "Sing, or listen forever." The roots behind him slithered open, revealing another path, this one leading deeper, pulsing with crimson light. Follow, or be claimed. Then he turned and vanished into the passage. Lena stayed on the cold floor, gasping. Somewhere far above, the choir hit a discordant note, and one of the voices fell silent. Lena remained frozen on the root-carved floor, staring at the tunnel where the hollow man had vanished. The silence that followed his departure was worse than the song, because now she knew what silence meant. One of the choir voices had stopped. Not paused, not rested, stopped. The chamber trembled softly. The tree was grieving. The torchlight dimmed. A root near Lena writhed and cracked open, revealing a single item inside, a wooden flute, old and blackened with age. When she reached out to touch it, a rush of memories not her own surged through her fingers. A girl in a red dress, a fire in the woods, a scream cut off by melody. She dropped the flute, gasping. The memory clung to her like smoke. Something was unraveling. The choir's balance. The spell her grandmother had forged to contain them. Every voice mattered. Every part held the whole together. The loss of one would echo through the others like rot through roots. Lena stood. She had to see where the hollow man had gone. The deeper tunnel felt different, not just in temperature or light, but in time itself. Moments stretched thin, then snapped back in sickening waves. She passed bones embedded in the walls, some still wearing shreds of clothing. One skeleton held a locket identical to hers. The tunnel opened into a narrow chamber. At its center stood a tree stump, ancient and black, carved with runes. Sitting on the stump was a child. No, eyes too old, mouth sealed with stitches of thorn. The child looked up at her and slowly reached out a hand. Lena hesitated, then knelt and took it. A whisper filled her head. She's almost free. And if she is, we all become sound again. Not people, just noise. Lena looked around. The chamber walls began to ripple, and the faces of the choir started to emerge, distorted, screaming behind the bark. And then she saw it. Carved into the wall behind the child, large and fresh, Choir Mother returns. The air was thick with a humming presence. The child's hand in Lena's felt too cold, not like flesh but something harder, like stone. The words, Choir Mother returns, echoed in her mind, and for the first time, Lena realized something. The choir wasn't just bound to the tree. It had no beginning. And the tree, it wasn't the source. It was a conduit, a vessel. Lena stepped back from the child, heart hammering. The sound from above, the distant melody of the choir, grew more intense, more frantic. She could feel it in her chest now, like a beating pulse resonating from the heart of the forest. A low rumble shook the walls. The roots beneath her feet vibrated in response, as if the forest itself was awakening. The child slowly stood, eyes never leaving Lena's. Their mouth twitched as if trying to speak, but all that came out was a hollow, ringing tone, like the breath of a flute being forced through broken pipes. The child's eyes darkened, flickered. She is coming. The mother. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The mother? Was that what her grandmother had been trying to warn her about? The thing behind the song? The thing that could end them all? Without another word, the child stepped backward, fading into the shadows like a wisp of smoke. The chamber groaned, and the runes on the walls began to twist, forming new shapes. Symbols that weren't meant for human eyes. Lena spun around, her pulse quickening as she realized the truth. The ritual her grandmother had tried to contain had never been completed. The choir's harmony wasn't a gift. It was a curse. And the choir mother was the key to its destruction. The ground shifted beneath Lena's feet, and she stumbled, catching herself on the wall. A deep rumbling filled the air, and a terrible voice rose, louder than the rest, a sound that vibrated the very earth. The mother was waking, and she was singing. The air grew thick, suffocating with the weight of something ancient and furious. The ground beneath Lena's feet rumbled as the earth itself groaned in protest. The wall behind her cracked, revealing deep fissures that seemed to stretch into endless darkness. Through those cracks, Lena could see it, a glowing red light pulsing like a heart, the source of the rumbling. The mother was waking. The song grew louder, distorted, wild, like a thing that had once been beautiful but had long since been corrupted. It was a sound that tore at the fabric of reality, ripping through the silence, through the air. A chorus of voices, all straining to rise together except one. Her grandmother's voice, the voice that had once been the anchor, had vanished. And Lena felt it in her chest, the emptiness where that voice had been. It was a hollow place pulling at her like gravity. With trembling hands, Lena pressed her palms against the floor. The ground around her vibrated with each note that grew louder in the distance. The choir mother is coming, the child's voice whispered, though the child was gone. The end is a beginning, a return. The walls of the chamber shook, and the ceiling splintered, allowing the roots from above to pour into the space. They wriggled like worms, crawling over the floor, pulsing with sap that shone in the dim light. The roots twisted into grotesque shapes, almost forming words. Lena couldn't breathe. The music was inside her now, pushing against her ribs, squeezing her lungs. Every note was a weight, but she couldn't move. Something else was coming, something older than the forest. It was hungry, its voice deep and guttural. The branches above her cracked open, and from the cracks, something began to fall. A face. No, not a face. A mask. But it wasn't made of clay or wood. It was made of leaves. The mask fell to the ground with a heavy thud, the leaves crumbling to dust at Lena's feet. The mask's hollow eyes stared up at her, waiting. The smell of earth and decay filled the air. The voice of the choir grew louder. All around her, the roots of the tree began to speak, low, rumbling like the growls of a creature beneath the surface. Come to us, Lena. Meryl. You are the final note. The roots writhed, the air bent, and the song swelled again louder and louder. It was time. The roots in the chamber stirred violently, thrashing like serpents roused from slumber. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of wet earth and something darker. The song, now a shrill, agonizing cacophony, reverberated through every inch of Lena's body, as if the very air itself were trying to tear her apart. The mask of leaves remained on the ground, its hollow eyes staring up at her, unblinking. A pulse of energy shot through Lena's chest, a sharp, biting pain that radiated outward like a spreading wound. The forest was calling to her. She could feel it now, the true essence of the song vibrating in her bones. The trees had always sung, but it was the choir mother who had woven the melody. The one who kept it all together, binding the song into something twisted, eternal, and alive. She was the final note, the last piece. A scream, her own, rose in her throat, but it was cut short as the roots surged forward, wrapping around her legs, pulling her toward the center of the chamber. The flute she had seen earlier appeared at her side, floating in the air, and a new voice joined the choir, one that sounded so much like her own it made her skin crawl. It whispered in her ear, "You are the music." Her hands trembled as the flute appeared in her grip, the wood cold as ice. Without thinking, her lips pressed to the mouthpiece. The breath escaped her chest, and the first note she played was not her own. It was the mother's. The world shifted. The song, no longer just a melody, became a living thing. The roots shuddered, and the very trees themselves began to tremble. The choir, once a haunting harmony, now thrummed with chaotic urgency. She could feel the eyes of the forest upon her, 1,000 unseen watchers, all waiting. Lena's heart raced. Her breath faltered. Her fingers moved on their own as if the song were being played through her, not by her. The flute filled the chamber with its eerie, hollow sound, growing louder with each passing second. She felt the power within her growing, stretching, expanding beyond her control. And then all at once the music stopped. The silence was deafening. For a moment, Lena's pulse slowed, her body trembling in the stillness. The roots had stopped moving. The trees stood frozen, their branches still as if the world had paused. And then from the depths of the roots came a voice, the voice of the choir mother. It was not a song, it was a scream. A scream that tore through the silence, shattering everything in its path. "You cannot stop it." The ground trembled, the roots pulling at her, twisting as the air grew thick with a dark, oppressive force. Lena felt herself being pulled down into the earth. A flash of red light burst from the trees, and the world around her shattered. Lena's world shattered. The ground beneath her feet cracked open like dry clay, and the roots surged upward, tightening around her, pulling her deeper into the earth. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and her mind fought against the tide of the song that now lived inside her. Every note she had played, every breath she had taken, had led her here, to this moment where the trees, the earth, and the song itself collided. The red light that had burst from the trees enveloped her, suffocating her in its heat. It was a burning light, the color of blood, of fire, of ancient wrath. It was the voice of the Choi mother, and it was coming from everywhere, from the roots, from the sky, from the very air. The scream echoed through the chamber, reverberating in her bones, in her soul. The earth groaned as the roots twisted tighter, dragging her into the darkness below. "You cannot escape it. You are the song now. You are the voice that will echo forever." Lena's hands gripped the flute, the cold would slick with sweat. She tried to tear it from her lips, but it was as if the instrument had become a part of her, a vessel for something far older, far more powerful than she could ever comprehend. The roots beneath her feet split open, revealing an endless cavern of darkness. A vast, underground ocean of shadow stretching into the void. And in that darkness something moved. The choir mother. The red light flickered and dimmed as Lena was pulled deeper, swallowed by the earth, by the music, by the horror that had been building for centuries. Her body felt weightless, suspended between the roots that had become chains, between the earth that had become a tomb. She opened her mouth to scream, but the scream was not hers. It was the song of the forest, the song of the choir, the song of the choir mother. And Lena understood finally what she had become. A note, a voice, the final breath of a dying forest, echoing through eternity. As the roots dragged her deeper, her vision blurred. The faces of the choir, the faces of those who had once been people, appeared before her, their mouths wide open in eternal song, their eyes hollow and empty. The voice of the choir mother filled her ears, her mind, her very soul. "Sing with us, Lena. Sing with us and you will become one of us. The song is eternal. You are eternal." And with that, Lena's voice joined the choir. Lena's soul stretched, pulled thin by the weight of the song. It was no longer just a melody. It was everything. The earth, the roots, the voices, the trees. Every leaf that rustled in the wind, every shadow that moved in the dark, they were all part of the song, and Lena was now a part of them. Her body felt hollow like a shell, her mind floating in the vast, endless echo of the choir. The red light pulsed around her, a steady rhythm, in tune with the heartbeats of the trees. The roots had dragged her deep into the earth, but now they had become something else. They were no longer just the forest's veins. They were its tendrils, stretching into the dark corners of reality itself, reaching into the fabric of time and memory. She could feel it now. The choir mother wasn't just the spirit of the forest. She was the forest. She was the song. She was everything that had ever been, and everything that would ever be. Lena could see her now, floating in the vast chamber of roots. A figure of dark bark and shadow, her face obscured by a veil of leaves. Her arms were raised, the roots that entwined her twisting in a rhythm that was not of this world. And then the choir mother sang. It was a sound that tore through the very fabric of existence. It shattered time. It shattered space. It shattered Lena's thoughts, her memories, her very sense of self. It was a song that had been born in the depths of the earth, sung by the first leaves, by the first breath of wind. And now it was her song. Lena's mouth opened, and a voice that was not her own poured out. It was the song of the trees, the song of the dead, the song of the forgotten. She could feel the voices of the choir joining hers. Thousands of them. Countless souls who had given themselves to the forest, who had become part of the song. Their voices were no longer human. They were sound, pure and unbroken, swirling in a storm of dissonance and harmony. And in the midst of it, Lena understood. This was the final note, the last breath of the forest. And when it had been sung, when the last voice had joined the choir, the world would end. The song would consume everything. Lena could see the world above her, far above the roots, far above the trees, far above the screaming faces of the choir. She saw the village, the houses, the streets, the people. She saw them all fall silent, their voices swallowed by the song. The end had come, but it wasn't the end of the song. It was just the beginning. The choir mother's voice rang out again, and Lena felt herself dissolve into the music. Her body, her soul, her mind, they became part of the choir, part of the song that would never stop. She was no longer Lena Marrow. She was no longer anything. She was sound. She was eternal. And the song would echo forever. Lena's consciousness splintered, lost in the rhythm of the song. Time had become irrelevant. Space no longer mattered. She was one with the eternal chorus, bound to the earth, the roots, the leaves. Every vibration in the air, every whisper of the wind was part of her, and she was part of it. The choir mother's voice, ancient and omnipotent, pulsed through her, a current that drowned all thought. The world above, the village, the people, they were fading. The last remnants of life outside the forest crumbled, swallowed by the song's reach. A silent wave of oblivion. But amidst the overwhelming power of the song, there was a pause. A strange moment of clarity. A breath held in a void of sound. Lena, no longer Lena, felt the presence of the thing that was her, still lingering somewhere in the darkness. The remnants of her human soul, struggling against the pull of the choir. It was a fragile, fleeting thing, an echo that resisted the inevitable. For a moment, she was aware of the world once more. The forest was still alive, but it was dying. The roots stretched deeper into the earth, their tendrils wrapped tight around the bones of those who had come before. The leaves rustled, but there was no wind to carry them. There was only the song. The choir mother's voice twisted in the air, louder now, becoming something distorted, something unholy. The earth groaned beneath Lena's feet, but it was not the same earth anymore. It was fractured, cracked, consumed by the dark roots that connected it all. The voices of the choir had merged, but they were no longer harmonious. They had become dissonant, chaotic, filled with pain. The song had evolved into a thing of madness, a screaming chorus of those who had died to fuel it, those who had lost themselves to the song's unending call. Lena, no longer Lena, could feel the weight of all those voices pressing down on her, suffocating her. They were trapped, forced to sing forever, trapped within the infinite repetition of the song. But in that moment of clarity, she realized something. She was not the final note. The final note was the end. And that end hadn't come yet. There was something still alive in the world beyond the song. A memory, a hope, a flicker of life. She didn't know how, but she felt it. A single thought, a single spark, a choice. The roots tightened around her, threatening to crush the last fragments of her resistance, but she fought back. She had to fight back. She didn't know what it would cost, but Lena reached for it, that tiny sliver of self, the part of her that had not yet been consumed. And as the choir swelled in a final crescendo, Lena made the only choice she had left. She broke the song. For a single, fragile moment, there was silence. The earth stopped groaning. The roots stopped twisting. The air grew still, and the oppressive weight of the song lifted, just for a second. In that rare, suspended instant, Lena felt herself separate from the choir. She felt the echo of her human self, the part of her that had always fought, always resisted. The roots began to recede. For the first time, Lena could hear the distant rustle of wind, the faint crackle of leaves beneath her feet. She could feel the cold air against her skin, the dampness of the earth on her hands. The song, that endless, all-consuming melody, was fading. It was a whisper now, a ghost of its former self. The choir mother's voice, once a deep, commanding force, trembled, faltered. Lena could feel it like a fraying thread, stretching thinner and thinner, on the verge of snapping. And then, with a scream that rattled the very bones of the earth, the choir mother died. The song shattered. Lena fell to her knees. She gasped for air, but the very air itself felt wrong, as if the world was still catching up, still trying to breathe in the absence of the song. The trees above her, the roots below, they were all empty now. The oppressive force that had once bound them was gone, leaving only the hollow remains of what they had been. But the forest was not dead. Not yet. Lena's hands trembled as she pushed herself to her feet. The flute that had been a part of her was now silent, its power spent. The roots that had once held her captive were now lifeless, like dried vines. The chamber around her was dim, as if the very light had fled in fear of the broken song. In the distance, she could see a faint glow, a flicker of light that seemed out of place, like a star trapped in the remnants of night. It was small, faint, but it was alive. It was the world, the true world. Lena didn't understand it, but she knew one thing now: she had broken the song. The choir mother had fallen silent, and with her, the forest's eternal melody had fractured. The roots that had bound the world together had snapped. But something else was emerging. A new voice. It was faint at first, barely a whisper, but it was there, growing stronger with each breath, with each step Lena took toward the light. The song had been broken, but life still wanted to be sung. And in the distance, the word Lena's body felt as though it were being drawn toward the distant light, an unspoken call. The broken song had left its mark on her, deep, indelible, but now the silence that followed felt almost like a wound. The trees, their leaves wilting and decayed from centuries of endless song, seemed to sigh in unison, as if mourning the loss of something irretrievable. But there was something new growing in the air, something that wasn't there before. The faint light ahead pulsed again, brighter this time. A soft, gentle glow, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a long, dark night. Lena's heart, which had once beaten to the rhythm of the choir, now beat to this new pulse. It was slow, deliberate, and alive. Her hands shook as she reached for the remnants of the flute, but as her fingers brushed against its surface, she felt something else. A faint vibration, a resonance that wasn't there before. The flute wasn't empty. It was waiting. The light seemed to beckon her forward, urging her toward it. Each step she took, the air grew warmer, and the trees around her began to shift. The branches no longer groaned with the weight of the song. Instead, they moved with the rhythm of the wind, as if they were breathing again, as if the forest were waking up from a long, endless slumber. Lena couldn't help herself. She raised the flute to her lips, hesitant, unsure. But something in her chest, something ancient, urged her to play, to give voice to the silence. As her breath filled the flute, the first note she played was soft. It trembled in the air, a fragile sound, like the first breath of spring after a harsh winter. It was not the same as the twisted song of the choir mother. It was different, pure, full of possibility. The trees shuddered, their branches stretching toward the sky as if they were waking from a long, painful sleep. The roots, once corrupted and twisted, began to curl upward, reaching toward the light. The leaves, shriveled and decayed, stirred with the beginning of new life. The light, the soft, pulsing glow, began to expand. It spread through the clearing, spilling across the forest floor like water, bringing color and warmth with it. For the first time in what felt like centuries, the earth felt alive again. Lena played again, this time stronger. The sound of the flute swelled, and the air seemed to hum with it. The trees stretched higher, their leaves unfurling, turning green once more. The forest that had been silent and dead was awakening, and it was responding to the song she had just begun. It was rebirth, the first note of a new melody. Lena closed her eyes as the song grew stronger, the sound filling the space around her. It was no longer a burden. It was freedom. A freedom that carried with it the weight of all the lives that had been lost, but also the promise of all that could be reborn. In the distance, the village, the people, the world that had been swallowed by the song, they were waking up too. The light spread further than Lena could see, until it touched every corner of the world, restoring balance to everything the choir mother's song had consumed. Lena let the final note fall from her lips, a soft sigh of air that lingered in the silence. The trees, the leaves, the wind, all seemed to breathe in unison with her. The song was over, but the world had begun again. The forest had begun to breathe again, but the air felt different now. Lighter, brighter. It was as though the trees, the leaves, the earth itself had been holding its breath for centuries, waiting for the song to end, for the silence to break. Lena's heart raced as she stood amidst the rejuvenating trees, the first true warmth of life slowly returning to her body. The air no longer felt oppressive, and the roots, now freed from their corrupted grasp, stretched toward the sky as if they were reaching for something new, something born from the very earth beneath them. But even in the midst of this renewal, a question lingered in Lena's mind. What now? The song had broken, and the choir mother had fallen silent, but the forest was not yet whole. The trees were awakening, but the world had been irrevocably changed. Lena's eyes scanned the now glistening forest, the new leaves that hung on the branches like the first promises of spring. But there were cracks in the earth, deep fissures that ran through the soil where the roots had once twisted. The old, dark memory of the song still lingered there, like a scar in the landscape, a shadow that could never be completely erased. And then she heard it, a voice. It was faint at first, so faint that she thought she might have imagined it. But then it came again, a whisper like a leaf rustling in the wind. It was coming from the depths of the forest, beyond where the light had touched. Lena hesitated, but the curiosity, the pull to understand, urged her forward. She gripped the flute again, though it now felt heavier in her hands, like a burden, like a piece of herself she wasn't yet ready to face. She stepped into the forest, the ground soft beneath her feet. The voice grew louder with each step, but it was no longer a single voice. It was many voices, soft and melodic, like the remnants of the choir. The voices of those who had been lost. The faces of the villagers, the choir members who had joined the song, began to emerge from the shadows. Their forms were ethereal, translucent, not fully of this world but not entirely gone either. They moved like wisps of smoke, their expressions full of sorrow, of longing, and of something else. Something that reminded Lena of the first spark of hope she had felt when the song had broken. One of them, a woman with long tangled hair and hollow eyes, stepped forward. Her face was familiar, though Lena couldn't place it. Her lips parted, and she spoke in a voice that sounded like the wind itself. "You have freed us, Lena, but the forest, the song, it was never just ours to carry. It is everywhere, in every tree, in every leaf, in every breath." Lena swallowed, her throat dry. "What do you mean?" she asked. The woman's form flickered as if the wind itself had swept through her. She reached out a hand, her fingers brushing against Lena's cheek. "The song may be broken, but the forest is not yet healed. There is a balance we must restore, a harmony that must be found." The other figures, those who had once been part of the choir, nodded. They were not the same as they had been when they were trapped within the song. They were free now, but their freedom came at a price. Lena's heart began to ache with understanding. "What is the price?" she whispered. The woman's eyes softened. "The song must be played once more. But this time it will not be for the choir mother. It will be for us, for everything that has been lost. For the forest's heart to beat again, we must play the final note, the one that will bind us all together, not in song but in life." The flute in Lena's hands hummed with an energy she hadn't felt before, like it was alive with its own will. She closed her eyes, and in that moment she understood. The song had been broken, but the balance of the forest had not yet been restored. The voices of the lost, the souls of those who had given themselves to the forest, were waiting for the final note to bring them peace. But it was not just their peace Lena had to seek. It was the forest's peace. She had one last choice to make. Lena stood at the edge of the clearing, the ethereal voices of the lost choir swirling around her, their presence both a comfort and a burden. The air was thick with their sorrow and longing, a reminder of what had been sacrificed to the song. They had been trapped, bound to the forest and to the choir mother's will, but now they were free, and their freedom was incomplete. The woman who had spoken to Lena, her form flickering like a half-remembered dream, stepped closer, her eyes full of unspeakable sadness. "The final note," she said softly, "it is not just a sound. It is a sacrifice. The balance of the forest depends on it. But so does the future of the world." Lena's hands trembled around the flute. She had always thought of the flute as a tool, a simple object that could produce sound. But now she understood. The flute was not just an instrument. It was the vessel that would carry the song of the forest, the final note that would restore harmony, but at a cost. The voices of the lost choir began to hum, a gentle, mournful melody, barely perceptible but growing stronger. Lena could feel the pull, like a thread woven through the very fabric of the world, leading her toward the final act. But the question weighed on her. What would it cost to play this last note? The song had been broken, but in its breaking, the forest had been left fractured. The land was healing, yes, but it was not whole. The balance was still fragile. "What will happen when I play the final note?" Lena asked, her voice tight. The woman looked away, her expression distant, as if lost in the memory of something long past. "The forest will breathe again. The roots will stretch, the trees will rise, the song will return. But it will not be the same song. It will be a song of life, of healing. The spirits of the choir will rest, their voices no longer burdened by the eternal melody. But the forest will demand a new harmony, a new balance." Lena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing against her chest. The flute in her hands felt warm now, as though it recognized the finality of what was to come. She had played the song before, but she had never understood it as she did now. The song was not just a haunting melody. It was the lifeblood of the forest. The balance between the living and the dead, between light and darkness, between nature and the world beyond. It was a song that sustained everything, but it also consumed. If she played the final note, the forest would heal, but there would be a price. A new life would begin, but the forest would always carry the weight of its past. Lena looked at the spirits around her, their faces now full of hope, but also of fear. They too understood what was at stake. They had lived in the song for so long, had been shaped by it, consumed by it. Now they were free, but their freedom was incomplete. The final note would give them rest, but it would also bind them to the forest forever. The flute hummed softly, as though urging her to decide. The woman who had spoken to Lena earlier stepped forward, her translucent fingers brushing against the flute. "The song will never truly end, Lena," she whispered. "It will live in the trees, in the earth, in the winds. But you must choose. Will you play the final note and give peace to those who were lost? Will you bring the harmony of life back to the world?" Lena took a deep breath. She had already made her choice. She stepped forward, her fingers gently caressing the flute's surface. The voices of the choir rose around her, their sadness now mingled with a quiet sense of release, as if they too were waiting for this moment. The first note she played was soft, a tremor in the air. The second note was steady, a heartbeat echoing through the forest. And then, with all the strength she could muster, Lena played the final note. The sound filled the forest like a wave, washing over the land, over the trees, over the roots. It was a sound of peace, of closure, of a song that was no longer a curse, but a blessing. The wind carried it through the leaves, through the branches, through the cracks in the earth. The spirits of the choir faded, their forms dissolving into the air, their voices now one with the song of the forest. The last of the lost souls found peace, their burden lifted. The trees, once twisted and corrupted, stood tall and strong again. The earth beneath Lena's feet, once broken and scarred, now pulsed with life. The forest, the world, everything was healing. Everything was returning to balance. And Lena, the one who had broken the song and played the final note, stood in the heart of it all. She was no longer just a part of the forest song. She was the end of it. The world was whole again. The forest was still, yet alive in a way Lena had never experienced before. The final note she had played had dissolved into the wind, and now, there was only the soft murmur of leaves, the quiet rustling of branches, and the distant song of birds finding their voices again. The oppressive weight of the song that had bound the world for so long was gone. Lena stood in the heart of the forest, the flute still in her hands, now silent and still. It had served its purpose, but now it felt like just another object. The true power had come not from the flute itself, but from the choice she had made. Around her, the trees had shed their dead leaves. They were whole again, their trunks strong, their branches stretching wide into the sky. The forest was no longer a place of sorrow. It was a place of rebirth, of life, of harmony. The roots that had once tangled and clawed at the earth now spread beneath her feet like a gentle foundation, connecting everything in a web of balance. Lena took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air that seemed to vibrate with the energy of new life. She could feel the pulse of the forest, the heartbeat of the land itself. It was alive again, and with it so was the world. But even in this moment of peace, something lingered in the back of her mind, a question that hadn't been answered. She turned toward the clearing where the first flicker of light still hung in the sky. The forest had returned to balance, but the question remained: what would become of her? What was her place in this world now that the song had ended? The voices of the lost choir, those who had once been part of the song, had faded into the wind. Their whispers were gone, their suffering ended. The spirits of the forest had found their peace. The forest had been restored to its rightful state, but Lena was still here. She had broken the song, she had played the final note. But what now? The answer came to her, not in words but in feeling. She was part of the world now. The song had not been something external to her, something that could be broken and discarded. It was always inside of her, in the rhythm of her breath, in the pulse of her heart, in the sway of the trees. She was the end of the song, but also its continuation. Lena raised her eyes to the sky, watching as the last vestiges of the dark clouds melted away, revealing the soft glow of the sun. For the first time in a long time she smiled. It was a smile of acceptance, of understanding. The song had come to an end, but the music of the world would never stop. It was in the wind, in the rustle of the leaves, in the whisper of the branches. And for Lena, it would always be a part of her. She walked through the forest, her steps light, her heart full. She did not know what the future held, but she knew this much: the world would heal, the song would continue, and she would walk with it. As the final light of day fell over the forest, the last of the lost souls whispered their thanks on the wind, their voices now one with the earth. The song had been broken, but life had begun again. Thank you for following the journey of the Choir of Dead Leaves. Don't forget to like and subscribe and watch out for the next.